I had a chef salad.
I had a sausage dog, which looks like a hot dog, but it's not a hot dog thing. It's like an actual sausage.
Well, it's hot.
It was cold because it's from yesterday.
Oh.
Did you heat it up?
Yeah.
I added spicy ketchup to it.
Heated it up in a different way.
Give it a different kind of heat. Yes.
Yeah. Scott, what'd you have?
I had a mushroom and Swiss from The Habit. Remember The Habit?
Oh, yeah.
What are we talking, like a sandwich or a burger?
Yeah, burger, and it was great. And
that sounds really good.
I should have probably gotten a chef salad now that Tom mentions it, but...
What'd you have, Sarah?
I had a breakfast taco that is,
for lunch.
also perfectly fine for lunch.
Taco.
Yeah. 2 corn tortillas, eggs, avocado, tomato, arugula, feta.
Very good.
So yeah, sort of a California twist on the breakfast taco. It was delicious.
I had a mandarin orange for dessert too.
Maybe you can have a Cantonese melon for lunch or dinner.
It's a very bureaucratic orange.
An English loaf, right? You can have. Are there any dishes that have like either linguistic?
I don't know. Ponder that while we do Daily Tech News Show, and we'll get back.
French fries.
Oh yes, the obvious.
Belgian waffles. All right, here we go. You guys ready?
Yep.
In 3, 2. Dave Broadbeck has supported Independent Tech News directly for 5 years. Be like Dave. Become a DTNS member at patreon.com/DTNS. This is the Daily Tech News for Wednesday, May 15th, 2019 in Los Angeles. I'm Tom Merritt.
And from Studio Feline, I'm Sarah Lane.
From Salt Lake City, Dave Broadbeck fan Scott Johnson.
And I'm the show's producer, Roger J.
Yes, indeed, folks. We have a load of tech news, including the Translatotron, a ban on facial recognition in a high-profile Western city. Rhymes with Bam Bencisco. Let's start with a few tech things you should know.
Google announced new ad types coming to its mobile services. Search will have gallery ads that let advertisers display multiple images that users can swipe through. Ads will show up in the Google Discover feed, in the Google app, on Android homepages, and on YouTube, but not on Google.com for mobile.
Interesting. Well, DJI launched its Osmo Action ruggedized, that's correct, compact camera, a competitor with the GoPro Hero, if you may be familiar with that model. The Osmo Action can capture 12 megapixel photos, 4K and 4K HDR video, has electronic image stabilization, and is dustproof, shockproof, and up to 5 feet, shockproof up to 5 feet, and waterproof down to 36 freaking feet. That's pretty good. It has a 2.25-inch touchscreen on the back and a 1.4-inch on the front. The Osmo Action costs $349 and is available right this second.
Fans of Spectre and Meltdown, please welcome ZombieLoad. That's right. Security researchers discovered 4 bugs in speculative execution on Intel chips, which they call ZombieLoad. One of the researchers, Daniel Gruss, told TechCrunch it was easier to exploit than Spectre, but more difficult than Meltdown. Almost every computer running on Intel chips dating back to 2011 is affected, including virtual machines. It does not seem to affect AMD, though, or ARM. Intel has released microcode to patch the bugs. Apple, Microsoft, and Google have also released patches. It has not been found in the wild yet. But while most users are at extremely low risk from it, as always, we advise you to promptly update your software.
Facebook announced that users who violate its most serious content policy against dangerous individuals and organizations will be suspended from using Facebook Live video for set periods of time, starting with 30-day suspensions for the first offense. Yes, one and done. Other restrictions against things like purchasing ads will also apply.
Oh, let's talk about another vulnerability, Scott.
Well, Microsoft has had their share of them over the years, but also has issued a software update to patch a crucial and critical remote code execution vulnerability in remote desktop services, aka RDS, in Windows XP, Windows 7, Windows Server 2003. Yes, people are still running that. Windows Server 2008 R2, and Windows Server 2008. Manual downloads of patches are available for XP and Server 2003, despite the fact that both operating systems are no longer being supported. In fact, 7 was just added to that list and will soon be not supported. Anyway, the vulnerability is a pre-authentication and requires no user interaction, similar to the WannaCry malware. Windows 8 and Windows 10 are not vulnerable in this case.
Yeah, this is interesting for multiple reasons. One, good on Microsoft for patching something even though they don't officially support it. There are a few contracts to provide security patches for Windows XP users out there, like specific contracts, which means it probably wasn't costly to create the patch since they would have to create it for those clients anyway. But they are making this available as a manual download to anybody who has Windows XP or Windows 7, despite the fact that they don't want you to continue to use them, which implies to me that they think this is a very serious vulnerability, the way WannaCry was. The thing about these kinds of malware is they're wormable. So you don't have to do anything for them to infect you and then move on and start infecting other machines on the network, which is unfortunate because a lot of folks who use Windows XP, I'm not just talking about personal users out there, small businesses and places like that, may not bother to go download the manual update and patch their XP, in which case they'll probably get infected.
Yeah, you say, Tom, good on Microsoft, and indeed that's the case, but it does point to, Microsoft could easily say, well, just don't use this like crazy outdated version of Windows. We've been telling you this for years, but the fact that they're like, well, enough people just don't listen and still are using that, or for whatever reason, just, can't upgrade. This is serious enough that it needed to be addressed.
Well, that's the part that grabbed me, is that there are enough XP machines in the wild and Server 2003 and whatever else that they had to go back and sort of work outside their normal, support system for operating systems. They no longer actively
less than
support.
4% of the market still runs on XP.
That's just crazy to me. But I guess that's a big enough deal where I'm both glad that they're doing it, but also it reminded me that we still have a whole lot of old operating systems out there that are vulnerable. So good on them.
Yeah, there are companies that have mindfully not upgraded from XP. They have internal software they don't want to recode. Those people will probably go and download this update. They may even have a client contract with Microsoft because of it. But it's the odd XP user out there who's just dusting off his old Dell, or maybe a small business that just doesn't want to pay to upgrade. That's the ones you got to worry about.
Google has released an app called Rivet, developed by its experimental workshop, Area 120. Rivet contains more than 2,000 free books for kids, along with an assistant that uses speech tech to help kids who get stuck on a word, who are, trying to learn to read and maybe need a little bit more help. The app can read a word out when it's tapped, or listen to the child's own read and then tell the child which words they said right, as well as proactively jump in when it can tell that a child might be having a hard time sounding something out. It also includes definitions and translations in more than 25 languages, so this is going to apply to a lot of kids. Rivet is also available on the App Store and Google Play Store for free in 11 countries. When I first read this morning, I was like, okay, yeah. I remember when I was learning to read, we had those sort of it was like little record player, like 45 records and books, and it would ding when you were supposed to turn the page. So you kind of felt like you were reading before you were actually ready to read. And there was probably some reading retention that happened, but this is next level.
Oh yeah. My kids are all fine readers now and have been through the rigors of their junior high school, and even in a couple of cases, college course reading material, and they're just fine. But had this been available when they were little and they were just starting to get, reading skills, even as young as, I don't know, my daughter was reading at 2.5 or 3 in a really rudimentary way. My oldest, she would have benefited hugely from this. And so I hope it's something parents get a hold of. And I hope teachers don't see it as like, robots are taking my job. Because every time I see a story like this, I think, well, if we get really good at this, like really good at it, then who needs an English teacher? But we're not there yet. Everybody calm down about this fake emergency I just announced.
Well,
you created the emergency. You now need to calm people down.
It's sort of like how I feel about Google Translate. I use Google Translate somewhat often. It's not the same as a French tutor, but it's definitely a supplemental thing that helps me. I can learn as I'm studying on my own.
Yeah, I don't mean to suggest that this would replace reading with your child, but this is trying to emulate some of the best parts of reading with your child. When you read with your child, you help them out when they get stuck. You can tell, like, oh, you're having trouble. You know, look, let me tell you what that word is. Or they may point at a word and go, what is that word? And you say it. And this machine learning can do some of those things, which doesn't mean you shouldn't still read with your child. But there are times when you don't. You just let your child read on their own. And when they make mistakes, they get no reinforcement on that. So this is supplemental to you reading with your child. When they're reading on their own, they can get some feedback and help speed them along. Unlike Walt Disney's Lady and the Tramp Bozo approved record reader.
I had that one. I really had that one.
Has the little book inside and the 45 that goes ding.
Well, and there's also, there are lots of reasons that a child might be tripped up by reading. Dyslexia, it's something that can be overcome, but you have to identify that beforehand. It's different than a kid just being like, I'm just getting used to this whole reading thing and kind of memorization of what words are like. So if the app can help identify things that need to be addressed sooner than later, that's really cool.
Yeah. My sister, she has a master's degree in psychology, and she's super smart. She always has been. And I always noticed something when she was young. She would read out loud no matter what it was. And you could hear her up the hall all night, just reading out loud and enunciating everything. And I used to think that was crazy. I now think it was really smart. And now we have an app or a service or a technology that perhaps would even aid somebody like her who swears that the reason she got anywhere was because she read out loud. So now kids can do it along with an app, and it can tell you when you're wrong or you're right.
Speed you along the way. Speaking of Google Translate, there's a research project out of Google called Translatotron that not only translate what you speak, but delivers the translation as spoken word, as an audio file in your voice and cadence. It works by not doing the normal 3-step process of, recognizing what you said, turning that into text, then translating the words in the text and trying to put it back together in syntax in the translation, and then doing text to speech to read it back. No. This just converts the spectrogram of your speech using a machine learning algorithm to be able to identify like, oh, that speech pattern usually means this phrase, so that it is turning your own speech into another language. The accuracy is not yet as good as the slower 3-step process that I just talked about, but it's pretty good. In fact, they put a couple of examples up on their blog post about this. So here is an example of an input in Spanish.
Larry me preguntó cómo me sentía y creo que es cuando empecé a llorar.
And here's what Translatotron spits back out.
Larry asked you how I felt, and I think it's when I started to cry.
Now, when we were listening to this in the pre-show, Scott pointed out, like, the second guy sounds like maybe he could use to sober up a little bit. So the enunciation isn't exactly the same, but you can tell, like, oh no, that's that original guy's voice, and you can understand what he's saying.
Yeah, it's really cool. I would assume, well, in usual Google fashion, the name's terrible. Change the name.
Translatotron.
You don't think Translatotron is a cool name?
That's something, I don't know. Some about it rubs me wrong, but maybe it'll sound
It sounds
better.
like something in like 1962. You'd like.
Yeah, I think
name a
Translatotron
futuristic
was
thing.
in Lady and the Tramp.
Right.
On. Yeah.
By the way, we've buried the lead this whole show. How Tom has that record handy is yet another magic trick by the master, Tom Merritt. But anyway, this is a really neat thing. We've gotten pretty good at, and also, by the way, the text of that translation, I don't know if that was accurate or not, but the English translation sounded kind of nonsensical. So I don't know if that's
okay. Here's the actual translation. Here's the Spanish again.
Okay.
Larry me preguntó cómo me sentía y creo que es cuando empecé a llorar.
Here's the reference translation. This is the actual translation.
Larry asked me how I felt, and I think that is when I started to cry.
Larry asked you how I felt, and I think it's when I started to cry.
Interesting. Okay.
I mean, neither of them really sound like the original to me, but I get what they're going for. And I think that, yeah, sure. This is a first iteration of something where, and I have had conversations with somebody, where we're both like using Google Translate and then like robot voice, tell him what Sarah meant to say in the beginning. Like, like that it's clunky. It kind of works, but it's definitely clunky. This is, once this becomes more seamless, this is absolutely cool.
And we shouldn't lose sight of the fact this is a research project, right? They're showing
Yeah.
like, look what we did, not here's a product ready for you to consume yet. So I'm pretty impressed at the ability for it to just look at a spectrogram and come up with something that translates that well, even if it does sound a little bit like it needs a cup of coffee.
Well, I'll tell you who else needs coffee. United States FCC Chairman Ajit Pai. Not really. He's probably fine. He is proposing a clarification to FCC rules to make it clear that carriers can implement blocking of robocalls. Oh, everyone loves a good robocall by default. All right, as long as a way is offered for consumers and customers to opt out of the blocking. The rules would not prevent carriers from charging for blocking services. A 2015 FCC order was unclear whether opt-in was required or not. So most carriers erred on the side of caution. Pai's proposal and a proposed clarification would be up for vote on June 6th, so real soon. Pai hopes it would lead to further innovations, like, and this is a quote, blocking based on contact lists, which the new rules also make clear would be allowed. The rules go into effect if they pass on a vote, which will happen again on June 6th. I just got one during the recording, by the way, a robocall, so it seems appropriate that it happened just now.
You know, when I first read this morning, because I get a lot of robocalls, I'm used to no longer answering my phone if any phone number comes in that looks remotely like my own, because I know that that's what it is. But they still get me every once in a while, and it has become a real epidemic. And I know I'm not alone in this. Like, robocall volume that I've gotten in the last 2 years is like, 4x what I used to get. But, and my carrier happens to be Verizon, if I'm going to be charged for blocking robocalls, that's pretty annoying.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be across purposes a little, although Ajit Pai does go out of his way to say, we would hope that carriers would provide this for free because it would reduce costs on their network to block robocalls.
Oh,
Because
well,
they don't
I'm
have to
sure
deal
you
with,
would hope. Yes.
But he makes a good point. Whatever you think of him, he makes a good point here, which is it actually is cheaper to just block robocalls than deal with the fallout from robocalls, increased use of your network for one thing, and all of the support calls you might get from people complaining about robocalls.
Right. Yeah.
That doesn't mean the carriers will do it, though. You're absolutely right. They may try to charge, in which case it's opt-in if they're charging you, because you have to agree to the payment. If you don't pay, they're not going to block your calls for you anymore. So hopefully they implement it for free. Although John Brodkin at Ars Technica was less hopeful about it than I am, because he says they currently charge you for robocall blocking on carriers right now. Why would they stop?
Right. Yeah. It's like, hey, do you want a better version of this carrier service? Then pay us and we'll give you a better version of this carrier service. I also am jealous of anybody who's like, you know what? I got 20 people on my contact list, or I don't know, whatever the number is. I don't need anybody else. I'm just going to go ahead and block everybody that's not in my contacts. I wish I could do that. If I could do that, my life would be so much more simple. But you do get random calls from numbers that sometimes are legitimate, and I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that personally.
Well, by default, go ahead.
Well, and there's also third-party software that can do that for you right now. You don't have to wait for the carriers to.
Sure. And by default, iOS lets me make a contact list, or my favorites list, rather. So the favorites column, they'll always supersede the sleep function, where I'm saying do not disturb, the little moon. So they'll come through whether I got the moon on or not. That's maybe a way to do it. Put all the names you want on there that you want to get, and then just put your phone on moon for the rest of the time, and nobody else can get in. That might work.
Yeah, I like it better at the operating system level myself.
Oh, I would too. Yeah.
Well, maybe you'll like this, gentlemen. The city of San Francisco's Board of Supervisors voted 8-1 to prohibit city personnel from purchasing and using facial recognition technology. The ordinance additionally requires city departments to submit surveillance technology policies for public vetting. The ordinance will need to pass a second vote by the same board next week to become final, but it appears to be on its way.
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason if it was 8-1, it's not going to suddenly
Right.
flip.
Yeah.
Like five board supervisors are not going to flip by next week. So it's just, the way San Francisco runs its stuff. It's not actually an inactive it's not actually an active ordinance today, but it will be. Sounds like. And I have mixed feelings about it. There's two things going on here. One, San Francisco is a famously liberal city, and so it is very concerned about the rights of its citizens, especially minorities. And there's a lot of legitimate concern about facial recognition providing false positives. And when it provides false positives, it ends up harassing minority residents out of proportion. which is not good. So there's that concern. There's also the tech backlash in San Francisco. There's a lot of anger with the tech companies and the people who work at the tech companies, things like, protests and blocking buses. And that probably fed this a little bit too. Like, let's slap down these tech companies like Amazon and even Microsoft, who's called for regulation of this, but they still provide it, who provide this facial recognition technology. So there's a couple of motivations behind this. I don't know that banning it outright gets us to the place we need with facial recognition, which is to make it free of bias, or as free of bias as possible, and to see if it can be accurate enough to be helpful to law enforcement. Banning it outright won't allow us to experiment there. But the fact of the matter is, the city of San Francisco is banning it. That doesn't mean all the cities in the world will ban it. The UK has been trialing it. So we'll get plenty of research on that eventually.
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of examples of cities that are doing exactly the opposite, who are like, hey, we got to make this technology better, and we're on our way, but we're committed to doing that. San Francisco is just like, nope, doesn't work.
Yeah, and they like Tom says, there's so much backlash right now. I mean, I hear it from people who live there in the tech sector, who are kind of annoyed at being the guinea pig every time some new tech comes along. And this is certainly not the first time anyone's being asked to try this technology, but to sort of blanket ban it in this way seems a little rushed. Like, I think you maybe should just leave your options open for later when the tech improves, or when there's reasons it may be
they might.
Yeah, and they
might reverse course.
Sure. There's always a chance they could. None of this is in stone, but I guess I'm just not surprised they're being, they're wearing gloves on this one, and I think I get it.
Well, folks from Netflix are going to host a panel at the E3 conference. You know that E3 conference, Scott? Video about the video games?
Sure.
It's coming up
Heard
in
of
June.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. Netflix panel is called Bringing Your Favorite Shows to Life, Developing Netflix Originals into Video Games. And on Twitter, Netflix did that thing where it very cutely asked E3 if it was busy in June and could it stop by and talk and hang out, and promoting this panel. And in the course of that conversation, mentioned the upcoming Stranger Things game, which looks like kind of an 8-bit take, which would be in character with Stranger Things. Now, Netflix has said in the past it's not getting into gaming. So it's interesting. A lot of people are like, oh, you're not getting into gaming, but you're doing a panel at E3. There's lots of ways for companies to not get into gaming and still be involved in gaming. One is to contract people to make a Stranger Things game for you. And I imagine that will be the discussion on the panel, is what are the best ways for us to turn Netflix properties into video games without becoming a video game company.
Yeah, and they've already done, like, there's a Stranger Things game on Android and iOS that was pretty successful, I believe, came between seasons 1 and 2. Did okay. They're talking about more of that, obviously. A lot of people are going to jump to the conclusion, and I think it's a fair conclusion, when they get up there, it will be both about their properties and what could come from games based on them. But I think they may also talk a bit about what they did with Black Mirror, with the recent experiment of sort of choose your own adventure style gaming. They did this with the Minecraft game, or excuse me, the Minecraft game that's built in there. Now, a lot of these are very, at least right now, they're like Dragon's Lair, for those listening who know what I'm talking about, where it's kind of predetermined in a lot of ways, but you may have points at which you can make a choice. And so if you make a choice, a lot of times it's very binary. You get one or the other.
Kind of like Telltale games, right?
Yeah, the Telltale
games,
exactly. Yeah. That maybe is the most advanced version of what this is, but otherwise they've sort of dabbled in small ways. To do this at E3, I feel like they got to say more than just, hey, we're hoping to license our cool shows out. I think they're going to get up there and say that, but also we're now going to go this much further in interactive storytelling. Mm-hmm. And it means multiple endings, because we're going to come up with technologies that generate the results on the fly and give you, maybe CGI that looks like it's a real production, but really you determined where it went or whatever. It also this whole thing kind of points to the idea that E3 is changing. Sony is not presenting this year. EA is not there. A whole bunch of big studios and publishers are not there. And as a result, you're seeing kind of odd stuff crop up. This, I would say, is one of those. So I'm interested in that fact alone, just to kind of see what E3 is from years from now, because it may be a very different kind of show and less about core gaming and more about integrated entertainment. And Netflix is, who better positioned right now than them?
Well, and it kind of, I think, like, okay, let's just say this whole thing becomes something more than a novelty. Like, how will a television show or a movie that maybe, you know, the people involved in production say like, this could be a great game. Like, how does that dictate the plot line and the story overall?
Right. Well, that's the question. Like, if they're just talking strict licensing, then they do it like everybody else does. If you're making a game, I was just recently replaying 2015's game based on Mad Max, called Mad Max, about the time Fury Road came out. And when they do those sort of deals, WB makes the deal, and the publisher and the developers get together, and they sit down with the creators of the content, the IP holders, and they say, all right, well, we think this is overall the kind of game we want it to be, and here's mechanically what I think the players will be doing. And then you build the game out that way, and you make changes as you go, and then you go for your release. That's very possible. We could see things like Bird Box and I don't know what all, but
Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt is going to be an interactive storytelling like they did with Black Mirror. And they also did a Man versus Wild type one recently as well. So they've been trying different genres in this interactive storytelling. And the one thing Netflix has been saying is, we want to do interactive storytelling. We don't want to get into video games. We want to do interactive storytelling. So I'll be very curious how this panel walks that line to say, well, our interactive storytelling will take you this far, and then maybe we'll hand you off to a game that a partner has developed that you can play on such and such platform. Yeah,
and it could be both. There's no reason two things can't happen here. I think the bigger issue is, will traditional viewers like all this? Like, do they want to have all this programmatic kind of algorithmic choice making in movies? Do they want to have their movies and their video games in the same place? I'm not so sure. I don't know, actually. I'm not really compelled by it because, again, they're very binary choices. There's only so many endings you can pre-film for how things end up in Black Mirror. So it's not the most dynamic kind of quote unquote gaming scenario, but there's probably ground to do more. And certainly they could do more programmatically. They could do more with data flying back and forth between a user, player, viewer, and Netflix. So, I mean, clearly they think they've got more here to show. So it's going to be super interesting in June to hear what they actually have to say on stage.
Well, folks, if you want to get all the tech headlines each day in about 5 minutes, don't forget you can subscribe to dailytechheadlines.com.
Also, thanks to everybody who participates in our subreddit. You're the best. Submit stories and vote on them at dailytechnewsshow.reddit.com. If you hang out on Facebook, join our group if you haven't already. Facebook.com/groups/dailytechnewsshow.
What's in the mailbag?
Oh, Tom, I'm glad you asked. So on GDI yesterday, we mentioned that my next Live With It segment, which is me living with new technology for 3 months, is going to be smart bulbs, and they came today in the mail. In fact,
ooh, yeah, that was. I know.
We got 4 Philips Hues, the whites, and then we got. And Tom, remind me how I say it. Lifex. We got 2 Lifexes. So we're gonna test a couple models out, and I'm really excited about this because I don't have any smart bulbs, never have. And now I will. And we got some really good feedback. I just want to read a couple. The first one comes from Todd. Todd says, I recommend getting the hue colored lights instead of the just white lights. A little too late for that, Todd, but Todd says, having the ability to set colors really expands the ability of smart lights. I have some 16 in my house, so I can speak with some authority. I use some of them as wake-up routines to simulate a sunrise, where they start as red and they're dim, and they gradually change to bright and then slightly bluish white light. That's kind of cool.
Philips whites you can dim and do different color temperatures, I think, with. They just can't turn red.
The
Lifex ones, I believe, can.
Ooh.
So you've got a couple options there.
All right, cool. That Charlie dude also weighed in and said, I have 3 or 4 different brands of Wi-Fi bulbs in my house. My fave is the Cree bulb. They're cheap. They don't randomly disconnect. I've found that the GE bulbs do that. They have a good range and work with our Wink 2 hub. I heard they work directly with Echo as well, but I haven't tried that yet. Yeah. So we got a good little experiment going on here.
As long as you're not involved in NovaCore, Cree bulbs probably are fine. It's a little Avengers joke.
Nice. Well done.
Hey, we also got Mike, the police officer, writing in with a full description of his thoughts on security systems as a police officer. We'll have the full thing in the show notes if you want to read it. It's really good, but here's a summary. He says he's responded to thousands of residential alarms in his 10 plus years as a cop and can only remember one in all of those 10 years where the alarm indicated an actual break-in. He's like, they're almost always false alarms. He says, even if they're real, most burglars are gone before police response can happen anyway, especially since most burglars come in the late morning when people are at work and nobody sees they're around. He does say that alarms that provide video and audio are more helpful, writing, This newer wave of connected cameras essentially lets you be your own monitor and act more quickly when contacting law enforcement. No monitoring service as a middleman, and provide descriptions to responding officers. I own both a Ring doorbell and 3 Blink XT cameras. He also doesn't put much stock in Ring's social networking features, and he adds, peace of mind is worth whatever you're willing to pay for it, and I would never tell someone to not purchase whatever makes them feel safest, but want to know the best burglar deterrent? Get a dog. I can't remember ever working a single residential burglary where the victim owned a dog. Plus, they're cute and love you and junk.
Ah, you're speaking my language, sir.
Yeah, thank you,
Although
Mike.
I feel like Otis would be like, hi, let's make dinner.
What you got? Don't tell the burglars that.
Hi, new friend.
Thank you, Mike, for sharing your insights as a police officer. Really appreciate that.
Absolutely. I always sort of wondered, I've never had an alarm system in my house. Well, I actually have, but I've never paid for it to be engaged. And I always wondered okay, well, I would know after the fact that this happened. But I mean, are you going to catch somebody, a perp in the middle of their crime? Unlikely, because they're not going to sit down and watch some TV while they're at your house.
Yeah. Or they will end up making news on Reddit.
Or that. Well, thanks to everybody who writes in every day. You're the best. And also thanks to Scott Johnson for being so wonderful. Scott, what's been going on the last week?
Oh, that's very nice of you to say. Well, there's a lot going on, including we talked about games coming up and we talked about E3. Well, if you want to get a great preview of what's coming at E3, make sure you check out the MVGB feed from Patrick Beja and myself. That's the monthly video game briefing at frogpants.com/MVGB. It's part of the DTNS network and really worth your time, especially if you're just a casual tech-minded gamer who likes to follow the industry. We cover the big stuff on that show, and we got that big preview coming up. And of course, Patrick and I are planning all kinds of E3 coverage as we do every year, so keep an eye on that. You can also find me on Twitter over there at Scott Johnson.
Folks, if you are like, wait, Live With It, GDI, what's all that? Well, Good Day Internet is a larger version of the show where we talk about a wider range of topics that you can get through our Patreon. And Live With It, the recent special was about Jabra Elite earbuds, and the future one will be about these light bulbs. And you can get that as well by becoming a member at patreon.com/DTNS.
Our email address is feedback@dailytechnewsshow.com. Write us. Tell us how you feel. We're also live Monday through Friday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 2030 UTC. Find out more and tell a friend. dailytechnewsshow.com/live.
Back tomorrow with Justin Robert Young. Talk to you then.
This show is part of the Frog Pants Network. Get more at frogpants.com.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.
I also have the Wizard of Oz book and record.
What's that?
Handy is the weird bit.
Is someone just reading the book?
So the record reads it and then tells you when to turn the page.
Yeah.
For the Wizard of Oz?
Yeah.
That's a long book.
Why do you have this for real? I know you kind of went and found it before the show because there's no way it was within reach. I know.
I went and found it during the show because I forgot to go get it before the show.
Where do you?
Yeah, how is this all in the same room type thing?
Over there.
I think it might be right here. But no, but the Wizard of Oz, that's a long audiobook.
It's obviously an abridged version.
Oh,
right?
Okay, all right. I remember having
on the Great Plains of Kansas, a little girl named Dorothy lived with her Aunt Em. One day, Dorothy was walking home with her little dog Toto.
Yeah. No, I do remember back in the day. It was you'd have little 45s, and it would ding, and then it would tell you when to flip the 45 over, because they couldn't fit the whole thing on one side. And there was one that I had. I don't know why my parents got it for me, but you know that story, The Fox and the Hound?
Oh,
well, it doesn't end well.
No, it doesn't.
It's a real tragedy of a kid's story. And I remember it was something where at the end of it, I'd be beside myself sobbing. And finally my parents were like, okay, we're not gonna play The Fox and the Hound anymore. You can listen to Snow White or whatever it is the other stuff you're listening to.
It was as harsh as Bambi in the end. I know.
Just brutal.
I like that. My old Yeller 45 record.
There you go. Same idea.
Where the red fern grows, you should get where the red fern grows.
Oh, God.
Walking
Why do
Dead.
Why do they
Look at the flowers.
Right. Yeah. You know, The Shining for kids. It's abridged.
Little Jackie with all work and no play.
Yeah.
The Shining's
All
a
right.
bridge.
We got titles. Google's riveting reading app.
Good.
Still patching WinXP in 2019.
Also good.
Riveting and writing.
Yeah.
Just to the translatotron.
I like all of these.
Yeah. Auto blocking robocalls. Robo-blocking robocalls. Put your phone on the moon. Bam, San Francisco.
Ban San Francisco.
No, Bam. Well, I remember when I was like, it's a
Oh,
town that
oh.
rhymes with Bam, San Francisco. Netflix plays games with expectations. I don't know. To the translatotron sticks out to me, but I could go with any of these.
I like that one.
Yeah. It's as
To
much
the
as I don't want the name.
translatotron.
Yeah, I like the old time radio sound of it. That'll work.
And then for Good Day Internet, we have one submission on here. I'm so fancy.
Wait, who
said they were fancy?
I think that it was submitted when we were having the fancy department store discussion.
Oh, okay.
Oh, all right. Okay.
Montgomery Ward.
Right.
Very fancy.
We could have chef salad. I don't know.
You know what always bothered me? Like a chef salad. I know what's in a chef salad. Why is it called that? Depends on the chef.
Didn't we talk about this recently? I feel like we kicked this idea. I don't think we came to
I don't think I did.
Maybe it was while you were out. We were talking
possible.
about it. Yeah.
Okay. I just
So
feel
that-
like, that's
looked
being
it
a little
up.
presumptuous.
I feel like the idea is whatever the chef had laying around, he would chop up and put in a salad.
Oh,
It's
this actually
like,
does
you know,
sound kind of familiar. Maybe we
Yeah.
did talk about
Like,
this.
are you hungry? Well, I can whip you up.
It should be
something.
called the everything but the kitchen sink salad then. Not the chef salad.
Everything and the kitchen sink salad.
Right, because sometimes you get a little porcelain in your salads. Right? It's good for your teeth.
Why does this say Moen on this bit of crouton?
Little gritty
Yeah.
today. My chef salad. I don't know. I know a few chefs, and it's like it
made
really
of the
depends on what, like, I mean, being a good chef does not mean like, oh, this is the sort of thing that I do. It's like saying you're a good podcaster. Well, it's like, well, what's the content? What's the
Mhm.
content of the salad? Chef
What's
salad.
the best podcast?
Right. Yeah.
The one that you'll listen to from start to finish.
This one.
Mhm. Hey, so you know how a while ago we were talking about me using my old Sonos speakers to connect to my TV to maybe be a kind of like stereo input, and it was somewhat confusing as to how that would work.
Mm-hmm.
I've tried many options. None of them work. However, even though the Sonos One, unfortunately, cannot be used directly into my TV, the Sonos Beam can.
Mm-hmm.
And then my two Play 3s, which are the speakers in question,
Right.
can be connected to the Beam
And
as
then-
rear speakers.
Right. Okay.
So I actually have, I mean, it would only be 3.1 surround, but it
Right.
would actually be more surround than I had before because I
Sure.
used to have all three just pointed at me.
Mhm.
So I think that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, I like that. 3.1's not bad.
Yeah,
Um,
no, not at all.
And it's
And
gotten
I mean,
better.
and my living room is not a big room.
Mhm.
You know, it's like I don't even need to, have
mean,
anything on particularly loud, but I love the idea of having stuff behind me.
I do have issues with calling 3.1 surround because you don't have any rear speakers, so it's not really surround.
Well, but they would be. It would be the Beam would
you put
be
the
my
Beam
front
behind you.
speaker,
Oh,
and my
that's right.
two
Yeah.
plays would be
All right. Okay.
the.
Fair enough.
So
So
it'd be quadraphonic
Yeah.
because your beam is a
It
stereo.
would be triangular
Ah.
surround.
You just need to put
Yeah.
it in a van with shag carpeting and cruise the boulevard.
And I'm well, because I just feel bad because I'm like, these are nice speakers, but they're not smart speakers. Like it's like why doesn't Sonos let me use these just passively? But I think the Beam is that. I think that's the call.
Yeah. Sounds like a
Anyway,
good call to
yeah,
me.
just figured if anybody has better idea, let me know. But I think that's what we're gonna do.
Feedback at dailytechnewsshow.com.
I can't get anything
That's
fancy until my kids are older, and I'm pretty sure they won't drag a speaker on top of them. That's my only concern.
Well, that's a downer.
I'm sorry. Oh no, I mean it's one of those things where you just like I want tower speakers instead of the soundbar I have for my TV. But
Mhm.
tower speakers are relatively heavy things, right? 40, 50 pounds, depending on what you
Well,
get.
but
I mean,
that's how
I
big
got
you are.
rid of my nice Bowers and Wilkins speakers. Well, I gave them to a friend who
Mhm.
had just gotten a new house, and so I knew that he and his wife could use them. But yeah, I mean, they were huge. They were beautiful, but they were almost more than I needed, and they actually didn't. I mean, you would have to have a pretty large wall, to have like a TV mounted and the speakers enough on the side of them to make sense and it not look weird.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, they were extremely heavy, without fail. Like the hardest thing, anytime I moved, the movers would be like, "Oh, these speakers."
I don't prioritize speaker tech enough. I just don't bother with it, and I probably should.
I just
I
feel
should
like
too.
for what I want, everything is just small now.
Mhm.
Like I don't need the big thing, even though it looks cool. I don't need it.
It's just hard to find a very musical bass that you can buy that's like under $1,200.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's like a subwoofer, because that's always been my issue. Is like I can get away with like these speakers I have on my desktop are like these Wharfdale 8.1s from 12 years ago. They work pretty well, but they bottom out at 55 hertz.
But I mean,
So
are
I
you
feel
like
like-
going like deep bass, like
Well, that's the
regularly?
thing. Typically, your bass might kind of
Can't you
bottom
feel
out.
it? He's rumbling it right now.
No, but I mean, I had a subwoofer too, and like half the time I'd be like too loud.
Well,
Like,
see,
be
that's the
turning
thing.
it down. Yeah.
If you want a subwoofer, you want it to at least go at least to 35 hertz or lower, because certain instruments tend to bottom out much lower, like a bass, or if you listen to bass. But the thing is, you want a larger subwoofer because volume isn't the same thing as how low it goes or how well you can hear it. If you have a physically large, like a 10-inch subwoofer or larger, you can get away with a lower volume on it and you could still hear it.
Yeah.
Because it can propagate the wave.
Oh,
in a much
I
more
agree.
sphere.
It's having a sub, if it works with your setup, is always better. But it can also like shake your house,
Oh yeah.
Which is, some people want that. I don't really want that. I just want
The house is
that
a-rockin'.
richness. I want a
And
little
Tiffany
richness.
This
Ray
house
Vaughan
is a
fan.
rockin'.
Right,
You
yeah.
better bring something to eat because I'm watching
Don't
a
bother
cool.
knocking. Just come on in, said Stevie
Yeah.
Ray Vaughan.
We're binging some Netflix show.
I'm
Please
binging
don't come
the
empty-handed.
Marvel Cinematic Universe. How many of those punches by Captain America kick you out of the seat?
I could do this all day.
Yeah. He could do this all day. And he says, I know.
You're so awesome, Captain America. So awesome.
He is awesome.
Captain America.
Norman. Sorry.
Norman.
Yes.
I just got an email from someone named
My
Norman.
name's Tom.
I meant to say Roger. Did
Wait a minute. Is it because I look like Norman from what's his name on
No, it's because-
Tested.com?
No,
you're,
Norman
you're,
Chan,
you're
no.
welcome at all times, like Norm from Cheers. That's
Yeah, not Norman Chan, but
So
that's
the
fine.
heavy set guy that formed a divot in the bar because
that
of what he
everyone
said.
loves.
I literally got an email from someone named Norman, and I was looking at it while I was trying to say it.
That's fine. I'm just teasing you.
But anyway, now I forgot what I was going to ask you. What was it about? Oh, did you have time to go see it yet? Have you seen Endgame yet?
Yes.
Oh, good. What's your verdict? Because I know sometimes
It's a fun movie. I will say it's a fun movie. Like,
all right.
this is the problem. If you think about the movie real hard, you start the plot holes really kind of get annoying. Like, why did they do this? Why did they do
That's
that?
true. The entire Marvel.
But that's the thing. Like, if you
universe.
treat the Marvel Cinematic Universe as a theme park ride, you
Yeah.
go on it to have fun.
I mean,
You don't
I treat Marvel comics that way too.
Well,
Like,
yeah. Well,
especially
that's
classic ones.
it's escapism. It's fun. It's not a great movie. It's a very fun movie. And if you want to like have fun for a weekend, like for 2.5 hours, it's a great way to spend
If
it.
you like enjoying yourself over quality, Roger
Yes.
says, see this
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah, exactly. Listen,
I
so
was miserable, but it was great. Is not really the movie review.
on the rare occasion when I go to a 7-Eleven, I'll get an icy. Now I know it's bad for you, and generally the sugar wears off too quickly, and you get into that slump when your blood sugar level goes down after being spiked. But while you drink it, it's great. Just
Well,
don't
Lucy
think too much
Lucy
about
wants to say she's more of a DC gal.
Oh, really?
DC
Yeah.
Detective Comics.
Cat girl. Mm.
There's
right.
there's a cinematic universe that took a left turn and just fell into a ravine.
Yeah.
Did you hear that, Lucy? She says, I reject. I reject your opinion.
People like that Shazam quite a bit.
Lucy's
You know,
cat for those on audio.
and you
Yes.
know, and what's
Right,
weird is, from what I
yes.
understand, Shazam is like the exception that proves the rule.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, Wonder Woman was cool. That had its moments.
I
Wonder
think
Woman was really good.
Yeah.
I think what my biggest problem with the DC cinematic universe is, ever since like Nolan's Batman, they've all tried to be like this very gritty, sepia toned universe, and it's just like it doesn't have that fun, whimsical aspect. Like one of the great things,
gritty undercurrent for you.
well, one of the great things about Iron Man when it was first done is they show the whole process of him building the suit and learning, and you laugh along with him as he's like just doing all these like things that you would possibly do as well.
Yeah. And folks, if you want to laugh along with us as we talk about how we build the show, stick around, audio folks. There's more of that to come. Video folks, thanks for watching.